Transform all your company's milestones, big or small, into impact with Impact Hero. Whether it's a sale, a new hire, a demo booked, or anything else, with Impact Hero, you automatically generate a gift that matters, like a tree planted, a kilo of plastic recovered, or a piece of coral reef restored. Join the hundreds of companies that are already boosting sales and retention while making an impact. Go to impacthero.com/podcast now to get 10% off. Again, that's impacthero.com/podcast to get 10% off.
Focus areas are called future energy, future cities, and future technology. And in future cities, we are focusing on everything that basically enables the energy transitions in cities, like EV, everything that is around storage, everything that is around residential decarbonization that makes buildings more or less more effective and more efficient. That is in future cities. Then we have our future energy bucket, where everything that supports basically the broader energy system, like solar solutions, also storage for larger storage facilities, flexibility, everything that is around that. And everything that we do is based on software-only approach, basically.
Welcome to another ClimateTech podcast, interviews with the people trying to save us from ourselves. Veronique Hördemann is managing partner and CFO at Future Energy Ventures. We talked about that firm's investment strategy, the differences between corporate and traditional venture capital, and the importance of that so controversial word these days, diversity in the VC space. I reached Veronique in Essen, Germany. I'm Ryan Grant Little. Thanks for being here. Veronique, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
You are the managing partner and CFO at Future Energy Ventures. What does Future Energy Ventures do?
Yeah, the company is doing venture capital investments in ClimateTech since day one. And we are an early stage investor and supporting startups to grow and scale.
And what is day one? How long have you been operational?
Since 2016.
Okay, so the firm's been around for 9 years in ClimateTech. That makes it rather a pioneer. Are there any specific areas that you're focused on in ClimateTech? As I think you have a renewable energy background. Is that also the focus of the firm?
So the focus of the firm is basically everything around energy transition. So we are supporting startups that are supporting that topic. Everything that is around in three focus areas clustered for us. And our focus areas are called future energy, future cities, and future technology. And in future cities, we are focusing on everything that basically enables the energy transitions in cities, like EV, everything that is around storage, everything that is around residential decarbonization that makes buildings more or less more effective and more efficient. That is in future cities. Then we have our future energy bucket, where everything that supports basically the broader energy system, like solar solutions, also storage for larger storage facilities, flexibility, everything that is around that. And everything that we do is based on software-only approach, basically. Yeah, so we are supporting companies that basically fit everything together. Then we have all the different solutions, and the overall broader system that we see for the future is a comprehensive and well-working system with different parts, right? And we are investing in these technologies that are enabling that working system, basically.
Oh, that's very interesting. So it sounds like built environment, transportation, these types of things within cities, electrification of this, but from a software approach specifically. How do you make the decision to focus on software specifically and not get into the hardware space?
So it was a decision also from day one onwards, because I am, in our opinion, basically the hardware approach, which is totally fine. Yeah? Most of the times requires more capital, right? And if we have now 2 funds going. The first fund is basically a closed fund by now. We are not investing there anymore. And the second fund has now been established. And overall, the volume of these both funds, in our view, would not be sufficient to support basically the development of hardware. And we also believe that sufficient hardware currently is existing, and that this hardware, this technology that is already there, basically needs to be managed and optimized in a very well way in order to come closer to basically CO2 reduction and our targets, basically. So therefore, that's the reason.
So it's interesting. I mean, I know a lot of VCs are interested in the hardware space, but struggling a little bit with looking at what that means from a financing perspective. And I think, it's much easier for us to understand things like financing of SaaS or like on the software side, whereas hardware is, it's huge money, and there's, differences like project financing. There's, all kinds of different types of financing layers that are involved in that. And I think it feels like a lot of VCs are interested to get into that space, to deploy that kind of capital, but recognize that it's very challenging, and there's a huge risk of capital loss in that space as well. And I just wonder if you could, talk about maybe some of the thinking that went behind staying away from that space as well.
Yeah, again, as you mentioned, I think a lot of capital is required. Yeah. And I think also different financing forms are required to actually enable hardware to develop, basically. And we have had our experiences, right? So in the previous fund, we had experience also with hardware. Yeah, and what we have realized is that it basically is taking more time, more capital, and needs different structures in the end also to be scalable. And that's basically the reasons. And then based on our fund sizes, also in the first fund, but also in the second fund, this is in the end not manageable. Or we decided that we don't want to manage that.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the companies that you've invested in? Maybe just highlight a few from your portfolio and talk about what was compelling about the business case enough that it made it through and past the investment committee finish line.
Yeah. So I think, as mentioned, we have 2 funds ongoing, right? The first fund has been invested, so we are only managing it at the moment. And I think there are different portfolio companies that we think are worth to mention. Yeah. So I think at the moment, the best performing companies that we are seeing in the EV space are in the heat pump business. So they are developing quite well, also based on market and developments. So, and I think, and we have had our ups and downs, right, with all these companies. Yeah. So they are in Fund 1, the companies are already some time in the portfolio. Yeah. It's not that we just invested. So, and it's a matter of developing then from day one onwards now to a point where we try to make them basically available or sellable in the market, right? So that's the Fund 1 opportunities. And there are different companies currently that we are nourishing and trying to develop, right? We had some exits that also happened in the Fund 1. And I think from my perspective, I think because it was one of my deals, this was a very early exit basically of a company that's called GridX. And that was basically one of the very first investments we did in the fund, quite early on. And it was developed then very well from our side. And the company had a good product as well. And we managed it until exit, right? So that was one of the companies from Fund 1 that I would mention right now, because, as I said, it was my investment. But I think any other company that we are currently nourishing has a very different story behind it. Yeah, not in every company that we invest in that went through the investment committee in the first place is doing what they have done at the beginning, right? And I think that's also like the normal path we see, right? Some development, some changes in business models that we went through in order to make them actually attractive targets for the market. So that's Fund 1. And then for Fund 2, and perhaps that needs to be clear, the Fund 1 was basically a corporate fund with only one LP. The second fund is now an open structure with several LPs on board. And it's basically managed now slightly different than the fund before. And the investment we have done in the second fund is not much yet. So I think we have like 3 announced investments and we are currently working on 2 or 3 more. They had all very different backgrounds, right? So I think we know a lot of companies for quite a long time. So I think some of these companies we have now invested in the new funds, we knew already for like 2 or 3 years, followed them for quite a while. And therefore the investment decisions are always then a little bit more easy because you know a company quite for a long time. And the decisions in the current fund structure were all supported by our understanding what we think is basically the next hot topic for our thesis of climate change, of energy transition.
So, in fact, the first half of your career in VC was with corporate venture capital, and that was one of the Europe's largest energy companies, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was the first fund, and then you decided at the firm to spin out and bring in new LPs. How did that decision kind of emanate rather than staying in as a CVC?
So it was a long process, and there were also different things happening in the background. But the overall conclusion that we took basically together with our LP at that time, was that if we really want to grow our topic, that needs more capital. And how do you get more capital into our idea? Is to make it larger by also attracting additional LPs. And that basically started the whole process.
What's it like, in your role as an executive at the firm, dealing in kind of a more traditional VC setup versus a CVC? Do you have more people to report to, but maybe you're a little bit more nimble? I'm curious because I've worked a lot as a co-investor with both, of course, traditional VCs, but also CVCs. And I can see some advantages and disadvantages to both models, but you've lived it really for 5 years of each so far. I wonder if you could just talk a bit about how it's different from a day-to-day perspective on your side as the investor.
Yeah, so the conclusion is it's very different. Yeah. And I think the main difference is that basically we are now on our own, right? So decisions are done by us and we are proposing investments, and there's no additional board or committee behind it that validates or vetoes our decisions, basically. Yeah. We learned a lot, right? So I think within the corporate environment, it was a set up basically. Yeah, of course, you need to report to certain functions. You need to build your relationships within the corporate because it's also quite fluctuating depending on which people are currently taking responsibility there. Yeah. So I think the majority of our time there was really to make sure that we have our good relationship, that we actually show the value of our work, that we try to bring startup companies into the corporate system, to fulfill the requirements that were there necessary, right? And now in the situation, we have started as a startup, basically. So it's a new founded external company where we have now built up all the structures. We are regulated by the BaFin. So everything that we did over the last now 2 years, basically, or even longer, is to accomplish everything that is related to that. Yeah? And I think that's a big difference. So we are really a startup, basically.
So before you're running it basically off the balance sheet of your one LP, which is the company that you work within, and now you've got to spin it out, and as a fund, you've got specific kind of requirements about how you handle external money, all these kinds of things that, probably some more paperwork, but less kind of internal reporting.
Yeah. And it's a different mindset, I think, also a different mindset and a different also attitude towards decisions, and also perhaps to risk taking.
You mentioned some areas like investing in heat pumps, which I think Germany has done a really, really good job of building out this market. And I've seen a few startups from the UK, and in their pitch decks, they're always referencing Germany and kind of trying to replicate that. And so I can imagine that's been a very profitable kind of line of investment in the first fund. What kinds of things are you excited about for the second fund? What are you looking at? And what gets you really excited? You mentioned also electrification of cities. So is that still, are you still seeing new opportunities in that segment?
Yeah, so the overall investment strategy has not changed between the first and the second fund, because we still believe that at least for this next fund generation, our investment thesis holds strong. And we are totally convinced that we will still find within this investment thesis very good startups that support whatever we think should need to happen to enable the energy transition. So therefore, there was no change, right? The only addition that we have put to our strategy is now that we are actually an impact fund. So impact and CO2 reduction is now playing from day one in investments a bigger role. Although our previous investment fund has already completed that mission as well, right? Without us knowing, but this is the only change in strategy, and we are still excited about mainly the same topics. So everything that belongs to the mentioned buckets that we are looking at, and all these topics belonging to these buckets, we are still interested. And as mentioned, it's like everything that has to do with solar, managing solar, real estate decarbonization, storage, second life use storage, optimization and everything that belongs to that. Everything that has to do with energy flexibility, marketplaces, energy tariffs, trading algorithms behind it. Yeah, so everything regarding to that, and also like certain perhaps not so obvious topics, like we have looked into Earth observation, we have looked in emission management. So everything that is related to that is also of interest. And of course, EV. Yeah, so I think that's less exotic, but EV is also obviously one of the big driver for future city.
And what about the geography? So are you a pan-European fund or global fund? Where are you looking?
We are based in Germany, obviously. Yeah. So we are looking in Europe. We have also colleagues sitting in the US, and we have also colleagues sitting in Tel Aviv to do the APEC region. And that's our focus. And that has also not changed compared to the first fund.
You recently wrote that there's been some kind of comeback of European startup exits, which should prime the pump for some more investment. But of course, at the time of recording now, it's safe to say that the global economy is experiencing a bit of an upset and a lot of unpredictability. If you were going to place a bet right now on the European VC ecosystem, it's a tough question, but what are your thoughts?
I work with a lot of companies who plan to open up shop in or expand across Europe. My one big piece of advice, don't fall into the trap of setting up a new entity right away. Instead, talk to my friends at Paracar, who can help you get up and running without all the costs, not to mention the legal and HR hassle. When I was hiring in different EU countries, I wanted my team to focus on their work, not on the country's bureaucracy. After interviewing a half dozen international expansion firms, I chose Paracar because they were by far the most knowledgeable and they're great people. Whether you're a large multinational looking to expand abroad, a small business looking for the right talent, or a contractor, they'll sort it out. Book a free, no-obligation consultation right now at paracar.eu/climate. That's PARAKAR.eu/climate.
So I think it has to do a lot with risk and uncertainty, right? So I think generally, if you would have asked me like a few weeks ago, I would have said the European VC ecosystem is there and is working, and we see some good trends that there's an uptick. And that was true. Yeah. So we saw valuations going up. We saw also exit opportunities emerging. Yeah. And we also saw a lot of competition on deals from all kinds of investors jumping into the markets and onto this topic, ClimateTech, basically. Yeah. So a lot of money flooded the market, basically. Now, over the weekend, I would say, let's monitor, basically, yeah, because the outcome is still unclear, but uncertainty and increased risk, obviously, is a big problem for financial investors, basically. And it's still a little bit unclear, because it's so fresh, right? It's still a little bit unclear how investors will react, what the outcome will be, and what measures are going to be taken in order to accommodate for this increased uncertainty that has come over the weekend, basically. And I think that's the current situation, in my view. And we are not at the end of the funnel, yeah. So I mean,
no.
I would think, yeah, there's still certain room for negotiations. Yeah, there's some randomness in everything. Yeah, so I think the situation is still a little bit unclear, in my opinion. Yeah, and we will see in the next few weeks where this is developing, and only then I think there can also be a clear view how Europe, or especially also ClimateTech investors will go with that, right?
Yeah, and we're recording on April 8th, so about a week after the tariffs have come out. And I think it's safe to say that we have no idea where we are in the funnel or how big the funnel is or anything like that right now. So we will see. You were recently spotlighted by Startup Basecamp as one of the leading women in VC. And I wonder if you could talk a bit about the state of play for women in VC and also as ClimateTech founders.
So I think overall, also fact base is still that in startups as also as in VCs, yeah, I think it's still an underrepresented portion, right? So women are not so much climate tech founders and also not so much active in the investing world. And for example, I mean, that is something that is just fact-based. Yeah, I think in 2024, only 10.6% of female-led startups received funding, right? So, and that's a very, very small share compared to perhaps the potential that is out there. And I think overall, the chances to increase diversity here and to also increase potentially, I don't know, better results, because that's also like fundamentally proven that the more diverse teams bring more results, basically. Yeah. And this is something where we definitely see some potential to change or to grow there, right? And for us as Future Energy Ventures, we are trying to lead by example. I'm not sure whether you have seen our team, but I think we have tried to be really diverse, not only with respect to gender, but also with respect to backgrounds and everything, to really make sure that we perhaps can prove what has been the theory behind it, so that actually diverse teams can lead to better results. And we would also love to see more of that in startups.
Yeah,
that's not true for all the startups we invested in. So still, the majority of our startups is basically, also not female driven, yeah. But we are looking to also get better there, and we are encouraging female-led startups to apply or to come to us and ask for investments.
Okay, so to our female listeners who are starting up a company right now, take note. And I was also interested to see that you're based in Essen, out towards the west of Germany. And, you know, Germany has a very well built out climate tech VC sector. A lot of it's in Berlin with some outliers in Munich. And I wonder if you could just talk a bit about the experience of being in Essen and how important location is to the work that you do.
Yeah, so first of all, I mean, we have an office in Berlin because we see most of the buses in Berlin. So that's why we are also there. Why I'm sitting in Essen? For private reasons, basically, to be quite honest, yeah. Although the whole Ruhr area is developing also with regards to at least the startup scene, not necessarily climate tech, but there's a lot of ambition and activities happening here to build up that environment for startups to be here, to developing here, right? But generally, at the moment, we have our base in Berlin. Yeah, we are trying to get our network there. And that I am in Essen is basically based also on the fact that I have like the more operational, I'm doing also investments, but all the backup operations like finance and all the regulatory stuff can be done from anywhere, right? We are trying to also connect here in the Ruhr area, but we are doing it, but it's definitely more in Berlin.
Understood. And I was also interested to see you were posting about the school system and made a really interesting point about how the school system as it exists today limits innovation. And I wonder if you could talk about what you meant by that and a little bit about why that topic is important to you.
Yeah, it's also a private, personal topic because we have our struggles with a normal school system that children must run through. And I think overall, it's a very, it's our opinion, my opinion, right? So it's a very standardized, very strict system where little flexibility is allowed to happen. And the potential of children is sometimes not taken into full perspective there because you need to fit into that one direction the school system goes. And I think in the end, that limits basically the potential you get out of all these children we have, right? So the creative mindsets, the out-of-the-box thinking, the innovative ideas that children might have and can develop is basically limited and is not taking the full potential. That's basically the background, and especially for us, for me, it's personal, because we have a kid that is so creative and so has so much potential, but can't live it to the fullest because it's limited.
Understood. Maybe another topic for the future. I'm very interested in education and alternative forms of education as well. So one to talk about offline as well.
we can do that.
You talked about you've already made a call out to any female founders listening, but for other people who are listening to this episode, how can they reach you and get involved with the mission of Future Energy Ventures?
On every channel, email, LinkedIn, phone. So there's no limit. You can get me anywhere.
Telegram, telegraph.
Fax.
It's Germany. I know there's still fax machines.
No, but they're as anyone likes. So I think if there's real interest to meet and to exchange, I think there will be always ways to do it. I'm very open and very happy to do it.
Okay, well, I'll put some of those ways to reach you in the show notes. Veronique, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to another ClimateTech podcast. It would mean a lot if you would subscribe, rate, and share this podcast. Get in touch anytime with tips and guest recommendations at hello@climatetechpod.com. Find me, Ryan Grant Little, on LinkedIn. I'll be back with another episode next week. Bye for now.